There was no way you could know that was the favorite song of my grandmother, Verona Wilson McElroy.
Oh, it was my grandmother's.
And so it just, my heart is so full. We can go home now. So good morning, everyone, and here we are on, what is this, the second Sunday of November, and the year seems like it's going by, and I'm so thankful that we are all here, physically, Zoomers, love streamers, all of us here together, because it is a special place made sacred by our presences, right here and right now. So, our theme this month is the ocean of devotion. And when, as Reverend Cindy has spoken to, and I have spoken to, Reverend Jones sends us out the inquiry way before we get to these Sundays. What are you going to talk about? What's your title? And the titles show up, and they just pour through, and usually I don't have any idea what I'm going to talk about, actually, because it's Spirit's title. So what showed up today is divine deconstruction. Now, I want to say first, I want to just give a caveat to the two V's in the audience who are the construction expertise, the construction divas. I didn't know that this title was going to show up. However, that's what's showing up, divine deconstruction. So, as I like to do, let's start with a joke. And the reason I like to start with a joke is, I don't know about you, however, sometimes in my endeavor of enlightenment, I can get really serious. I can get really like, okay, now I do this spiritual practice, and now I do this one, and now I do this one. And sometimes the believe it or not, the joyousness of life, it slips away from me. I know you, that's hard to believe because you all know me. However, so that's why I like to start with something, just a little levity, and it's all spirit. It's all source itself. So here's our joke for today. 4 surgeons were discussing what they liked best about each surgery patient. And so the first surgeon said, you know, I really like operating on librarians, because when I open them up, everything's in alphabetical order. Okay, so the second surgeon says, I really like operating on accountants, because when I open them up, everything is numbered. Okay, so now they're going on and on. The third surgeon, she says, well, you know, I really like operating on electricians, because when I open them up, everything is color-coded. Okay, so the fourth surgeon says, well, really, actually, I really like operating on construction workers. And the reason I like that is when I open them up, they seem to understand that if you have a few parts left over and the job isn't done exactly when you said it was, all is well anyway. So I bow to you, V, our construction divas. So that really struck me, and it's really because we're going to talk about divine deconstruction. However, I have a great reverence and respect for the construction industry, which it's an opportunity for all of us to have that, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be sitting in this building. We wouldn't be riding on the roads we ride on, all sorts of things. So this divine deconstruction, what showed up for me about divine deconstruction is really, divine deconstruction is our opportunity to break down our old habits, our old beliefs, our old behaviors, anything that up until this very moment has not been serving us. Anything that absolutely is a way for us to change our patterns of thought. And you heard in the reading by MBB, Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith, about changing our patterns of thought. That we get to change from mechanical thinking, we get to be in a space and place of thinking which we take dominion of. And when we take dominion of our thoughts, then that dominion gives us an opportunity to think from the space and place of the divine within. So I have had an opportunity, I guess it's about a year ago now, to be invited to, and because it was on Zoom, I attended a meeting that our wonderful Sandra Smith, Agape licensed spiritual practitioner, invited me to, and it was a meeting for Pamela Price, who is yet to be our upcoming district attorney here in Alameda County. That's not the point here, though. And in the meeting, I learned about a woman, and her name was Susan Burton. And I have to say, I didn't know until I do know. I have led a very privileged life. And yes, it's had its ups and downs and ins and outs. However, it's been a very privileged and very blessed life. And so when the story of this woman, Susan Burton, really struck my heart, and it stayed with me. I guess this is about a year ago that we were in the meeting. Susan Burton is an African-American young woman, and she was raised in South Central Los Angeles. She, by the time she was 4 years old, had an opportunity, or not an opportunity, but she had been physically abused by the time she was 4 years old by a relative of a relative that was with her. She also was born and raised in South Central LA. Now, I haven't been to South Central LA, but I've heard about it and I know about it. And our own Michael Allen was born and raised there. So I realized that it is an opportunity for challenges and growth all the way around in South Central Los Angeles. And it is not just because of the people there. I want to make that real clear. The people of color that live there do not make the things happen to them that happen. All right, so I'm not saying that at all. Well, this Susan Burton, she was raised in South Central LA. By the time she was 4, she had been physically abused. And then, as she came into her womanhood in South Central LA, that's when the crack epidemic came around in South Central LA. First, she started drinking, and then she rode down that slippery slope into using crack. And she, in the times that this was happening to her, she was incarcerated 6 times. 6 times, in and out, in and out, in and out. And in the African American community, that's not odd. I just want to say that. My heart says to say that. Anyway, so she's in and out, in and out. One of the times she got out of incarceration, she had matured and she had a baby. And then when her baby got to be 5 years old, he was outside playing out in front of her house. He was hit and killed by a car. And the person driving the car was an LAPD detective, and there was no consequences. Somehow, some way, the law got twisted and bent around, and this is my personal perspective I'm giving you about that, so that there was no consequences. Okay, so her life, like, look at all these things in her life. So the last time she got out of prison, the last time she was finished with the incarceration, she decided to participate in divine deconstruction. She made up her mind, this is the last time. I'm not going back in. I'm not going back in the pen. And so what she did, one of the first things she did was she went for treatment. She went to this treatment facility, I want to get the name correct, Claire Treatment Center in Santa Monica. And she went there to get clean and sober. And while she was there, she got clean and sober in 100 days. And now she's 20 years plus onto that. However, when she was at this treatment center, Claire Treatment Center, she realized life was different over in Santa Monica than it is over in South Central. And she decided that wherever she was, the very truth of what she is, the purity and the possibilities of her can happen any place. The geography doesn't matter. And so she went back to South Central and she bought a house. After she got clean and sober, she and her sister bought a house. And in this house, she and her sister put bunk beds in all the rooms in this house. And they chose to meet the young women who get off the bus from prison. I didn't know this, that I do know this because a family member of mine was in prison. However, when you're let out of prison, it's just like, you're on your own. Bye, you did your time, you served your time, go, figure it out. And so she and her sister met the young women who were getting out of prison at the bus station and brought them to this home. And she started, the name of the company she started, the not-for-profit is A New Way of Life. Mm-hmm. And she allowed them to come stay there for free. And when they were there, she also had them participate in things like prayer, meditation, and goal setting. And then they could, from there, spring out into the world. Okay, so this really, as you can see, this story really struck me because it's really like I was being with divine deconstruction and it popped right into my head. Yeah, Susan Burton is a perfect example of divine deconstruction because she chose to do the things that are involved in divine deconstruction. First, she took dominion over her life. She actually stood still and said, I take dominion over my life. And the way she did that, there's 3 ways she did that. Self-responsibility. You know, I know from all of my beloveds who've been in treatment programs, part of it is self-responsibility. You know, we learn about the 4 stages of consciousness here, and one of them is, the first one is victim. But when you let yourself slide on out of victim, part of that sliding or part of that embracing is self-responsibility. I'm responsible for the life that I'm responsible for the life I'm leading. Not my mother, not my sister, not my cousin, not my husband, not my children. I'm responsible. So first she did self-responsibility. The second thing she did, which struck me really, was she had self-regard. And by that, she had esteem for herself. When she, all those 6 times, I mean, imagine those 6 times in and out, in and out, in and out. And at one point, finally, she decided to have regard for the truth of who and what she is, for the person that she is, and for the gifts that she's here to bring the planet. So she had self-responsibility, self-regard, and then she had self-recognition. You know, we talk a lot here about who and whose we are. There is no way that Spirit can make all the things happen on the planet without us. We are we are in absolute co-creation with the one power and the one presence. Each one of us here has things that Spirit has already decided is, you know, I read this thing a long time ago. Roger Till said it, Spirit's always whispering a message of support in your ear. And each one of us has that message in our ear. Each one of us has things that only we can bring. Only Lucy can bring what Lucy can bring. Only Reverend Joan can bring what Reverend Joan can bring. Only Helen can bring what Helen can bring. Only I, Reverend Verona, can bring what I can bring. However, the only way it gets brought, the only way it gets made is consciousness turns into form. And we are the form. So Susan Burton had a recognition of that she's the form. That form of Spirit is her. So those 3 ways, self-recognition, self-regard, and self-responsibility, is the way that we get to be part of the activity of divine deconstruction. So earlier this week, I was just laying in the bed being with this, okay? And actually, I was laying on my couch, what I call my couch bed, being with it, and thinking, okay, so let's just really drill down a little deeper, Verona. Let's get into it a little deeper. And what showed up for me is, in our lives, this is the activity of transformation is made of stimulus and response. Okay, we have a stimulus in our lives, we have a response. But in between the stimulus and the response is that sweet spot of dominion. There's that sweet space of dominion where we take dominion, where we allow ourselves to know that I am the I am, and the I am that I am already knows what to do. And as we learn here at Agape, that one of the ways we understand that we already know what to do is some of our practices, prayer, meditation, visioning, and I might add, listening to the intuitive voice within. I mean, really allowing ourselves to slip into the silence. And you know, after you're in the silence, it's so precious and spectacular that it rolls into the stillness. And then once we're in the stillness, allowing our inner voice to speak, allowing it to speak to us, because it, like Reverend Joan taught us last week, it loves itself already. And so we get to enter into, we get to embrace, we get to encounter, we get to be absolute expression of that self-love. We get to really listen and know that it's all held in this spectacular container of unconditional love. I mean, when you think about it, we are held, and when I think about being held in a conditioner of unconditional love, and what this shows up for me is that song that Helen sang. My grandmother Verona, who obviously I'm named after, I always knew when I went to her house that I was held in a container of unconditional love. I always knew when I heard the words, "Little Verona, come on." And I came to know later in my life is that because she was the expression of Spirit for me in that moment. Before, when I was a little bitty girl and didn't want to realize that I'm also an expression of Spirit. And then as I grew and learned and really and went to the church that I was raised in, which is Southern Baptist, and it was interesting, and I'm very happy to have that foundation. And when I got to really know, oh, when I look in a mirror, I'm looking at Spirit. When each one of us looks in the mirror, we're looking at Spirit. Each one of us is that which Spirit is. So if we allow ourselves in this divine deconstruction activity, if we allow ourselves to stay in, to place ourselves in, to get ensconced in, to feel comfy in that sweet spot in between stimulus and response, then we get an opportunity to take dominion. We get an opportunity to do just what Susan Burton has been doing all these years: self-recognition, self-regard, self-responsibility. So I was being with this, and I, of course, went to the Bible because I love it. It's a great workbook, and also because I grew up with it. And what came up for me in the Bible, or what showed up, is in 1 Chronicles, 28th chapter, in the 9th verse, it says, "Serve with wholehearted devotion and an open mind as the Lord, or the law, searches every heart and knows every desire." So here we are in this ocean of devotion in the month of November here at Agape Bay Area, and it was already here in 1 Chronicles, which was written who knows how long ago. That we really, really get an opportunity to serve with wholehearted devotion. That we get to leap into, jump into, spring into, crawl into, or walk into divine deconstruction. And that we get to use all the tools that are already within us. We get to do our own Susan Burton's expression of the one. And so when you think about it too, in the reading, Chief Seattle's reading, it's what really struck me, like when we burn with the fire within, when we burn with the fire of the will within, that our heart cannot be cold, and that we have untreatable will. And what spoke to me about that quote, as far as untreatable will, is that what we do here is we do spiritual mind treatments, and we treat. That's what we call our praying exercise. However, this is untreatable will. Like, there's no prayer needed. There's no extra added stuff needed. There's no improvement needed. It's already perfect. That we are already that burning fire of untreatable will. So all of this has been rolling around inside me this week, and I thought, wow, this is really wonderful. And I thought, so how's it showing up in my life? Because when Reverend Jones up here, when Reverend Cindy's up here, when Reverend TJ's up here, I really always appreciate it, no matter what reverend it is, no matter what mystic it is, whether it's a mystic without an R-E-V in front of his or her name. I always appreciate and know that. So how's that showing up in that person's life? Because I want it to show up in my life. I'm sitting here, I'm listening, I'm here from my own growth and unfoldment. So I was thinking about how it's showing up in my life. And I love it that this is a safe space where we are, so I can be completely open and vulnerable. So about 2.5 weeks ago, I had eye surgery. Some of you know I had glaucoma surgery, okay? And I must first say I'm so thankful to be living in this moment, in this space, and in this place, because the surgery can be done. 25 years ago, 50 years ago, 75 years ago, it wasn't possible with all the advances in modern medical science. And I want to say, modern medical science is yet another expression of spirit. It's the way spirit comes to form. So I had this really great surgery where my surgeon went in and cut another drain in my eye and put some stitches in there. And yes, I was awake. And it was a success, because what the surgery is for is to lower the pressure in your eye. Because I learned so much about the mechanism of our eye. I won't go into the ad nauseum part of it. However, our eyes, there's a lot going on in our eyes. Okay, so I had the surgery. And my surgeon told me, okay, and I'd had it before in the beginning of this year. However, this one was a little different and faster, and there was more medical technology, more medical advancement. And she said, okay, so for 2 weeks, you get to rest. You get to not lift anything over 10 pounds, so no grocery shopping, no. And I asked her, and she said, no, Miss Garland, you asked me before, no Costco. No going to the gym, no lifting anything. Okay, so I had that. Okay, I can do that, I know that, I've done this before, and I made food beforehand, and my wonderful son Alex said, Mom, if you need anything, don't go get it. I'm here, I can get it for you, okay? So that was really great and wonderful. And then it was so smooth sailing, then the little blip came along in this road. My daughter was going to Los Angeles, and she was going to LA for a girls' weekend. And she was going to LA on my former employer, and the flight she could take was at 6 a.m. And I want to tell you that usually whenever she goes any place, either one of my children go any place, I take them to the airport. I like to say the reason I take them to the airport is I love the airport, which I do. However, really when I drilled down a little bit deeper this week, I realized it's because I have this like addiction to giving. And I'm a giver, 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 and I'm learning to receive. I'm open to receive, and every day it's happening. Okay, so my daughter is going to LA. Departure is 0600 of her flight, which means she gets to be there at 0430. And Reverend Joan mentioned to me, yes, I'm stuck in the military time because 40 years I was working at United. Anyway, and I wanted to take her to the airport. However, really, the divine deconstruction that showed up within me, the self-regard, self-responsibility, and self-recognition is that I have no business waking up in the middle of the night to drive to San Francisco International Airport. I am recuperating. My eye needs to heal. I need to give every single cell in my body an opportunity to do what they know to do, which is to restore and heal me. And so I got an opportunity to really, really dive into divine deconstruction. You know, we often say when you're speaking about something, it works you well. It worked me this week because I got to tell my daughter, for the first time in her whole life, I'm not taking you to the airport. You get to the airport on your own. And it's not that I can't, it's that I am absolutely doing a divine deconstruction and putting me first. I am stepping into that space and place of receptivity versus barreling into the givingness place and space. And it wasn't, I have to tell you, it wasn't easy. I mean, it wasn't easy, and I will be transparent about this. I called one of my sisters, who has 2 adult children also, and I said, Becky, let me tell you what happened, Becky. And she says, Verona, why are you crying? I said, because this is really hard. Yeah. However, I got to know that it's really divine deconstruction on my part. It's really stepping into those things. So I want to finish this up by going back to Susan Burton and something that she did at her a new way of life, at her center. She had them do meditation, but she also had them do goals. So I was thinking about that word goal and an acronym poured through me for goals, which we get to participate in. Goals, our goals is giving our abilities loving space. Giving our divine abilities loving space. So I want to ask each one of you today, what's your divine deconstruction? In what ways are you giving your abilities loving space? And the main thing I want to ask you is, if you're not doing it now, what are you waiting for? Now is the time. We are the ones. This is it. Let's pray.